Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from the Austrian Alps, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center, New York, Kaustubha. Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to, what day of the week is it, Mara? Thursday, study the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we have a special guest today. We have your favorite Kirtaniya and mine, Ananta Govinda Prabhu, also from New York, Harry Bo. We got a little live crew here. His sister's here, Achyuta, and Garanga. We got a crew. We got a little crew here. Everybody's here and having a great day. But Shumpug's here, and we don't know your name, madam. Maya, welcome, Maya. Maya's always here. Maya's always here. That's what I find in my life. Maya's front and center. Welcome, everybody. So before we get into it, Miss Mary, you have any announcements for everybody?
We have Bhakti Recovery Group meetings today at 9 a.m.
Stick your little head in here.
and at noon. Also, you should check out the bhaktirecoverygroup.com for the online meeting list, because sometimes I don't announce the meetings because, they happen at 2 a.m. Eastern time, things like that, and they've already passed. So check out the online meeting list.
3 or 4 per day now.
Yeah, we're up to almost 3 or 4 a day.
It's getting serious.
Also, I saw that Kaustubha Prabhu posted the recordings of a lot of our classes from Italy up on Patreon again.
Yeah. So.
I was gonna say that's really good stuff. There's about 4 or 5 things we put up there from our time in Italy, and a lot of it has really captured the mood of what was happening there. So Patreon members, go check it out. It's posted.
And this is a community-supported podcast. If you like what we're doing and want to support us, we appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. I want to thank everybody who's already supporting us. And remember, if you are, double it. Just kidding. Just kidding. Totally serious. No, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. Serious. Okay. Welcome. So let's get Ananta here. Ananta's here. Hey, Bo, Ananta, what's your story? Tell your story. I remember going to the Brooklyn Temple, and you were just a little shy, a little kid.
Little bio. Why don't you just? Oh my God.
But yeah, I don't have this bio. I don't know his bio. I just know him as a kid from Brooklyn who's now grown up, and he leads. And he's not from Brooklyn. No, he's from Queens. No, I meant from the Brooklyn Temple. That's what I meant to say, from the Brooklyn Temple. And I used to go there just as a kid, just watching kirtan. Like kirtan in New York is unlike any other kirtan I've ever seen. Would you say that? Yeah, it's like next level kirtan.
You're gonna have to learn to share the mic today. I'm gonna handle the mic. You go ahead. He was speaking, and you were, and no one could hear him.
Excited! Introduction.
That's great. Okay.
I was building them up. We used to walk into those kirtans when we were just like kids, and we just would sit back. We'd think, this is the closest thing to a punk hardcore show we've ever seen. Are we gonna play the carrot on the stick again with the microphone? Okay. All right. So tell us your story. What was it like? And you grew up in Jamaica, which is interesting because that's where my father grew up in 1923.
Really? Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting.
Let me fluff this out just a bit. Okay, let me just fluff it out just a bit. Ananta is like many of you have heard his music, I'm sure, and maybe many of our listeners haven't. But Ananta's he grew up born into a Vaishnava family, a family of bhakti yogis.
Serious Vaishnav practitioners.
Very serious and like kind of core to the Radha Govinda temple in Brooklyn, right? Like your family has been like key members of that since going way back.
The pujaris, the priests, right?
Your mother is pujari there. Your father also?
He wasn't really Pujari, but he was very heavily invested in the management administration. So chairman on the board for a while, then he was on the board, and all of the nonsense that goes along with that.
It's hard work. And then your whole family coming down, your elder siblings were deeply involved, and especially from early on, you developed your musical skills there in the temple, which became very important. You're also an artist, so you're a very talented musician. You're a very talented artist. I don't know, what would we say, illustrator or fine artist
Or whatever.
Okay. and beyond that, I think you kind of play a role as kind of like a leader of the kirtan community in New York. You may not admit that, but I see that kind of people, they kind of develop around you, and you give them lots of incredible encouragement and direction and so on. We can kind of see, and now you're bringing up, even within your own family, many new kirtan leaders and other people that are not members of your family. I think you're training up. So we just wanted to hear, we want to talk with you today about art, about kirtan, and maybe we could start just a little bit about like your story of what it was like to grow up as a bhakti yogi in New York City, in Queens, and just I'm sure that was an interesting kind of world to navigate.
Yeah, it was. I was the weird kid because I grew up and this is what I knew. And then what would happen was I wasn't sent to Gurukul. My parents family got kicked out of the temple.
Kicked out of the temple?
For not sending the kids to Gurukul.
Okay, so we're going back like in the earlier history of the Krishna consciousness movement, where I guess the leadership was encouraging take your kids and sending off to schools, like boarding schools, basically. Your parents didn't go.
No, they were very much opposed to it. And decided that we'll keep our kids here. And so they told them, you can't live in the temple. He said, fine, no problem. And so we went to public school, but my parents, because of the way the inner city schools are situated in this, how it is, they were like, no, you can't. The Vedic tradition has a very high level of academia, even for kids. Like the kids' vocabularies my kid knows the word variegatedness, and who knows that word. So at a certain point, they were like, we got to send him to a better school. So it wasn't the zonal school. So we went to a predominantly Jewish school in Flushing. So I grew up as the black kid singing Hanukkah songs in the Glee Club. And then I was also in the temple. There was there were only a few black kids, which is a very interesting thing to navigate. But then I'd come home and they were always wondering why my house smelled funny, like either some sort of girl.
Your friends?
All my friends, they freaked out. Why the incense? They're like, what is
A guru, garam masala.
What was the incense they always had in the Brooktown? Vrindavan flower or something?
Vrindavan flower, yeah. And it's they were like, what is your deal? And so rather than answer that question, I was like, I can beat you in basketball, and if we have to fight, we can do that. and that's kind of how I navigated. In school, it was like in academia or sports, you just get really good at that. And it was really interesting because you don't want to be, as a kid, you don't want to be different. You don't know how to navigate being different. And so you try to fit in, but then you want to excel at fitting in. And so I did the things that I thought normal kids did. Never really got into, I was the straight edge kid, no drugs, no alcohol, but I was like, I could pretend like I was You know, I was like really good at like, yeah, I'm hanging out. Yeah.
Pretend like you're drunk or?
No.
He was like,
No, the cool thing is that because I wasn't drunk, I always seemed like I was like, they're like, yeah, he's holding it together. And but the other thing is that when you get really good at something, people are like, oh, what is it that you do? So for a long time, I'd be really good at basketball, and kids were like, so what is it? Like, do I have to eat a lot of French fries like you? What is it? And yeah, they kind of look towards what you're doing rather than me being the weird kid and trying to like, it was interesting.
did you ever come out of the closet as a Hare Krishna? When did the end? If so, when did that take place?
Yeah, has it taken place yet?
This is it. And you guys didn't tell me what I was, no.
We're doing it today on the show.
No, funny thing is, during Rath Yatras, because I'm a New York City kid and I'm hanging out in New York City, during Rath Yatra was like a stressful time.
Rath Yatra is this public, massive parade down Fifth Avenue, right down the center of Manhattan, where it's like a big Hare Krishna scene.
Where all your friends that aren't familiar with your lifestyle can see you. And it's really like you get real anxiety if you're like, I don't want them to see me in this dress and with my face paint on. And then like, yeah, it's just like, but I'm kind of conspicuous. I'm the guy right in the middle playing the drum as loud as I can. And then, so I remember one year we got to Washington Square Park where the parade ends. And one of my friends who I went to high school with, he was a cancer survivor and his head was shaved. And he kept it shaved after going through chemo and everything. But we developed a pretty solid relationship. And I saw him at Washington Square Park, and just like I brushed over, I was like, Mike. And I looked past the kid who was sitting on his lap with the blue hair. And I was like, and then it hit me. I was like, oh, I didn't know you were gay. And he's like, I didn't know you were Hare Krishna. And I was like,
Let's keep this secret.
But you know, the funny thing is that in that moment, it was kind of like, I guess this is just as weird as anything else, you know, and it was fine. I mean, I was also at the age where kids can be kind of cruel, but we're at an age where you can kind of be like, yeah, so what? You know what I mean? And it was hard to get through that, but New York is also a really dynamic, diverse place. So you can get away with wearing a bed sheet.
Did you, I know for many people that grow up in Bhakti Yoga families or Hare Krishna families, there's a certain point where you have to accept yourself that this is my faith, rather than just, this is the faith I was born into. It maybe there's some period where you're questioning it, or maybe you question it or even leave it behind, and then you come back and you fully embrace it. Was there anything like that for you?
Not really. Partially because I mean, I guess it's kind of early in the morning, but for my family, my parents were kind of like, read and know the philosophy. And so when I was presented with other philosophies, yeah, they were like,
Good parents. Read Prabhupada's books. Read.
Not just the comic books, the actual
no.
That's my thing. You read these comic books. I think you're going to get a lot out of them.
I tried to get into comic books and they were like, this is not what Prabhupada said. I was like, but like I became a little bit, I don't want to say arrogant, but I was like the Dig Vijay jackass. You know what I mean? Like if you present me with some philosophy, I'm going to defeat you.
So you embrace it as an identity.
Kind of, but it was because it was such a high philosophy that at a certain point, when you're having conversation with people, you're asking them, so what about this? And there are questions that we don't even know we want to ask in our scriptures. And then when you ask those questions to other people, it's kind of like, so the conversations usually didn't go too far because you're presenting them with questions that, you know, and so the faith was never a question outside of like in conversations with external friends or anything like that. They would ask questions and we'd have conversations, and it would usually end up when I was younger, me kind of like feeling like, yeah, I did a good job. And then as I got older, I was like, oh no, I'm not trying to defeat people. It got more to the point of how do we help each other? Internally, was where my struggle. Internally, like, with my friends who were bhakti yogis, and we had to figure out, we're very fanatic about certain things, and is this really the point?
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of, still that's what I'm navigating even now.
Yeah, I feel that even myself too. I think it's how much of this tradition is essential to what we're doing and is assisting us in going into the real thing, or is there any of it that's maybe even preventing, slowing us down?
Yeah, I find that a lot. I think that there are so many things that are microcosms of our understandings and of how the world and the universe works. And I think that even in kirtan, a lot of times, you can do something that you feel like this is really good and it's counterproductive.
What would you do that's really good that'd be counterproductive?
I learned mridanga really early, and I learned so much that I was the best ever anywhere in the universe in my mind.
Well, no, I think other people's minds too, but okay. Continue.
I actually told my son yesterday that you were the best mridanga player because he's learning. I said you were the best in the world.
I don't know how true that is, but I do know that when you know that in your mind, not believe when you know that you're the best, and then you have to make sure that everybody else knows it, it can really do a number on the mood of the kirtan.
It sounds like it, theoretically, at least. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So at a certain point, like the kirtan leader is leading, you're like, whoa, chill out for a minute. I'm trying to show people how good I am.
I tell you one thing that you are one of, or maybe even my very favorite kirtan leader, for real. And also mridanga player. And, there was a time where you were just really known for mridanga. You weren't leading kirtans. But one thing that I always appreciated about your musicianship was that you had the skills, but you kind of just, the way that I saw it was you kind of just like, I saw in my mind that you weren't prone to kind of like show it off, but you kind of always used it to enhance, which is a bit of a pet peeve of mine. Not like everybody's like that, but maybe you're saying you kind of learned that early or something, like you kind of, that was something that you worked through maybe early on.
It's so one of the things that really happened for me was at a certain point, leading kirtan is a very there's so many subtle things that happen when you're getting into leading kirtan. And one of the first things that happen is that you're saying the most beautiful thing that can ever be said, and you're singing it. And so then people start looking at you like,
That's pretty special.
you hear what he's saying? So it does a lot of the work for you. It's almost like if imagine going to your favorite artist's concert, they don't have to really sing. You know the song already. So what happens is they could hold the microphone out and the audience will kind of do all the work for them. If you go to a Beyonce concert, Beyonce can dance or whatever, but if she just stands there and she's like, hey, everybody, like, ah, and they're already ready to be there. So Krishna kind of he's like a supreme Beyonce. And
Heard it here first.
on Wisdom of the Sages. And so initially you get to this place where you start to feel like, and then slowly your ego takes a lot of hits here and there, but you realize that this has really nothing to do with me. This is really a relationship between the name, how it's manifesting, and the devotees. And I'm part of this darshan, but I'm a facilitator. So you're a pujari, and you just don't get in the way of the darshan and stand in front of the deity, and you move off to the side, you do what you have to do to facilitate it, and then you get out of the way. And so I don't feel like I sit with my sister and Gora, and recently we'll be doing kirtan with like people who have phenomenal voices. And I look around and I'm like, I'm not a singer. This is ridiculous that I'm up here. And so what I realized very quickly was that everybody is kind of responsible for this, and everybody's having this experience. And you want to bring everybody to a certain place where we can all be a community. It's Sankirtan, rather than me being here and then like I'm having this darshan of the Lord. And if you guys are cool enough, I'll also allow you to see what's going on here. And that, a lot of times you can see, like if you're getting really funky with the mridanga or with the tune or whatever, you can see people's eyes glow. They're like, and then it's no longer a communal thing. It's more about it's a show.
What do you see in their eyes? That they think it's really cool, or they
Whatever it is, it's distracting. You know what I mean? And
I was going to say the most difficult thing I ever had to do was, I'm a B to C rate kirtan leader, and it only helps if I have a really good mridanga player. But when I'm around my yoga students who don't know anything about kirtan, I am like Mozart of kirtan. The guy's the best. And so then I take them on pilgrimages to India, and I'm leading kirtans wherever we go. But then we show up at the Krishna Balaram Mandir, and these guys are like, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Styx of kirtan. They're the best. I was like, look, you guys, these guys are like the
Sticks.
Whatever. There's somebody who represents Styx in kirtan, I think. But my point is, like, that's just not my level of kirtan. So I go and I just appreciate that. And I bring all the students in. I remember the one day, and the whole trip I'm saying, well, wait till you get it. You want to hear kirtan, wait till we go to Vrindavan, wait till we go to Vrindavan. And sure enough, we go right to that prime time slot, which is 6 or 6:30. And I can't remember. I think it was Kirtan Premi or something. They point to me and they say, "Oh, Raghunath's here. Raghunath, today you lead." And I was like, "No, I'm not leading here. I'm not leading the Kirtan here." And then somebody else chimed in. Yeah, Raghunath's here. Raghunath should lead. And it was one of those things where like 3 Vaishnavas are telling you to do it, and you just do it. So my point is, whatever position you're in, where you have to play the role of leader. Either you're incredibly excellent or you're not so excellent, but you're still got to play that role. It's a very slippery slope because you have to lead. It's not like you're just going to be there. You have to engage everybody to sing. You yourself have to be into what you're doing. You can't be under a rock. But at the same time, you got to do it to serve God and not be God. And it's very delicate.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's extra hard when you actually are very good at it.
Well, you quickly realize that that's a relative assessment. Like you're like, I'm really good. And then like my friends are all of my friends are technically way better than, and I'm just like, I can't do that. But like what you're saying, I absolutely love being in kirtan with you. I love your kirtan, but it's enthusiasm. I think there's a story of Srila Prabhupada where he says, one thing I had was enthusiasm. And then you realize like, this is Bhagavad Gita. This is Arjuna who's at the top of his game. And he's like, I can't do this again. And Krishna's like, go kill your family and stop playing these games. And then at the top of your game, Krishna leaves, and then some people are like, oh, these guys are stealing. He's like, I'll go get them. And he's like, shut up. Who are you? And you can't even do what you're at the top of your game and doing. So it's a relative statement. And all we really do have is enthusiasm. And so at a certain point, when you're really into what you're doing, it transcends skill level. It transcends so many other of the externals that you really appreciate it more. I mean, we love Srila Prabhupada. We really do. If we're talking about from a material standpoint or externals, his kirtan is not going to be like next to Jagjit Singh, but you'll listen to Srila Prabhupada because of the enthusiasm and the sincerity and so at a certain point, that's really even the kind of music I like is the kind of music where you hear the person who's real. Oh, that person was crying when they were singing this, and they got deep, and the voice is cracking, and the notes aren't always right. But a pitch perfect is boring. It is really, because we don't we think that we want perfect, but there's only Krishna that's perfect. And then what does Krishna do? He arranges everything. So if the stars were perfect, that would be super boring. If it looked like a grid in the sky, that's boring. There has to be variety. There has to be this dynamic nature of so many things. That's what adds such sweetness to it. So yeah, I think once I got past that and I was like, oh, I'm not really that good or great. And also, this is really about Krishna. If you guys heard me singing in the shower, you'd ask me not so politely to chill out. Like, chill out, bro. This is, you know, and so Badahari Prabhu and I were talking yesterday, and he was like, my voice is like this, and like your voice is my favorite voice in the world. And it's not about being this classically trained, sounds like an instrument. We're not instruments. Well, we are instruments, but we're not. Yeah. No.
When you're speaking earlier, you were speaking about Sankirtan, and one thing I've witnessed a lot in your kirtans is, and it's kind of what I appreciate most in a kirtan leader, is that they see the role not as a performer, but the essence of it is to get everyone in one state of mind together, in a devotional mood together, singing in a sense in one voice together. And it seems like that's something that's there. Like even when we read about kirtan in a book like Chaitanya Charitamrita, it seems like it wasn't even just the music, it was the dance too. Like they had not only people leading the kirtan, and people leading the dancing. And so the whole thing is just to kind of get like everyone singing, everyone moving, everybody vibrating like in one united offering.
Yeah, for me, it's so interesting. Like what Raghunath was just saying about entering into Vrindavan and seeing like Kirtan Premi, who's like, he's one of my favorites as well. But I recently heard, I forget where I heard it, but hearing the different moods of Kirtan for me is like hearing a personal journal entry. And when they're all vibrating the same, it just sounds like a diverse group of people coming together collectively, and it sounds harmonious rather than it's not so dissonant. And I think that if you can, as a kirtan leader, I think that a lot of times you want the cadence, the rhythm, the tempo, and the melody to kind of be in a place where everybody can kind of join in with their unique offering. And then it's really nice rather than it being something. This is also why, I mean, I'm not really necessarily, I can't do all that, but I wouldn't.
I've seen you do some pretty impressive stuff.
It's not true. But I feel like if we were all, it was like a potluck dinner and you didn't, we weren't trying for a Michelin star, then, it would make better sense for everybody and they feel more comfortable with their offering rather than you be like, okay, listen, you go home and the guy's going to come check it out. And then, and Gordon Ramsay's going to be here cursing at your food if you don't do it right. So for me, I feel like that's where it gets really, really sweet, where everybody's making an offering and people, even a lot of times people feel a little uncomfortable when I'm you. And then at a certain point they sing and they're like, oh, okay. There wasn't, and everybody's enthusiastic for the other people, especially after everybody's already gone. And they're like, it's fine, just jump in, cannonball in, it's fine. But that's, for me, it's very similar to a story that Ayendra Prabhu we were talking about Ayendra yesterday, but he said that Krishna wouldn't agree to be bound in this Damodar Leela until all of the members of Raj were there and they were participating. Until that point, Mother Yashoda could not bind him up. And so Kirtan is also like that. Krishna is going to manifest differently when everybody's engaged and they're all like, okay, we're in. And, it's a very, it's also a very subtle art because you have to not care that people are going to hate you for calling on them. And
Sure.
Yeah.
Been there. I've been to this famous place where I just like to call on everybody. And then, people will sometimes come up to me after the kirtan, like, don't you ever call on me to, it's people's biggest fear is public speaking. And then, then I learned, okay, I can't just call on everybody. I'm just going to call the people I know. And of course, the next thing happens, Raghunath, you call on everybody except me. Why? What have I done so wrong to you? It's one of those things. It's hard. So now I vet everyone. What do you want? I'll give you whatever you want.
They have to sign a little piece of paper before they come into the kirtan. You can call them.
In my head, I have to memorize. Does she not or want it? I can't remember.
I used to get a little mental about it, and then I heard another thing, that people are really nervous about being heard. If you're having a conversation with somebody, they're still putting on there like, I'm doing my impression of what I think you want to hear about me. And singing is a very intimate thing, because either you can sing or you can't sing. And most of us think we can sing in our car when our favorite song comes on, but you'll know who can and can't when, like, if somebody else gets in the car, you know what I mean? And so a lot of times people feel like they can't sing, but what I always tell them, because when they do come after, like, don't you ever do that again? I'm like, listen, we're all in it together. I was like, at any point, do you feel like you were going to be able to say, all right, today I'm gonna sing for you, Krishna, and I want you to sit down. Where you've been standing a long time holding your flute, I want you to sit down and I'm going to blow your mind. This is no way you're going to sing for Krishna and blow Krishna's mind. And so it's not for everybody else. It's really your personal relationship. And so it's not, even if we were to hear you, it's irrelevant. And you start to see that people are like, oh, okay. But kirtan is a community thing. And ultimately we're all kind of insufficient, but it's our offering that's going to inspire somebody else. And I think that's what happens with me. I'm not the greatest singer at all, but I think that there's something endearing to other people, and they're like, oh, well, if he can do it, you know what I mean? And that's what I think is the whole purpose of our Bhakti Yoga. Whatever it is that we can do, somebody else is like, I'm inspired by that. And it doesn't have to be the same thing, but if I can see what great men do, or women, because we're woke, what great people do, common people will follow. I think that if we can do it in an inspiring way, that's the goal. So at a certain point, I just say, well, listen, how many people will you help? Because a lot of people feel like they can't sing. And so just belt it out, and you'll start to see how everybody gets to this place like, oh, okay.
You know, in the same way we were saying yesterday, how, okay, people are very refined in their skill, in their art. Can they do it without ego? And that was sort of like, we were playing around with that theme. But message out to those who really can't carry a beat or really can't sing. Also, I don't want to sing, don't call me. That's also can be a type of ego as well. We don't want to be humiliated, embarrassed, but we're doing it to serve Krishna, and Krishna's not hearing the tone of your voice anyway. So whether you're an incredible singer, don't do it for the ego. And whether you're a lousy singer, that's okay. Don't do it because your ego says, this is going to be embarrassing. We're just trying to do it without ego. However it comes out, it's not even up to us.
Yesterday, and you were just alluding to it now, after the show, we read this nugget from Beethoven yesterday. And he was talking about penetrating into the secrets of a particular art. And then if one can do that, then that art can like connect you with the divine or something like that. And so we discussed it a bit on the show yesterday. And then after the show, yourself and Raghunath and myself were discussing it a bit. And we're talking about this state of, I think in our circles, people call it empowerment. I think you use a term called fugue state.
A fugue state, where you are doing something, but you know it's beyond you, and you're not really. It's coming through you.
So this is something that's common amongst all types of artists, and maybe not just artists, all people from all different fields, maybe especially in art. I remember of a few instances where I heard about this from like great artists. Like I heard Bob Dylan being interviewed, and someone asked him, "Could you write a song like "Blowing in the Wind" again?" And he said, "I could never write a song like that again." And they're saying, well, why not? Like, you're the same guy, and he said, yeah, basically he said, I didn't write it. I was being used to write that song, and I'm not being used to write it anymore. So it's not like I can just do it. And I also heard Smokey Robinson speaking about Marvin Gaye when he was writing, recording, producing What's Going On, which was just a record that just kind of, it's one of those kind of musical accomplishments that kind of like reached a new height and kind of changed everything that came after it. Very beautiful and spiritual music. And he told Smokey Robinson that I'm not making this music. It's just God is making it through me. So I'd be interested to hear more of your thoughts on that fugue state.
But I think for artists, I actually think everybody has the artist gene, and we just have to figure out what that means. When I say artist, I mean somebody who's creatively expressing their human experience. So you can tell I'm against AI because it's a human experience. But eventually you get to a place where you realize that this is something that I've practiced it. I've done a tremendous amount of work to get my technical skill level to a certain place, but even then there's something that goes beyond what I know I'm capable of. And usually it happens after you've made something or done something, and then you try it again and you realize this is lightning. And you're asking me, I heard a guy on this Netflix thing, Abstract. He says, you're asking me to make lightning strike again. You asked me to win the lotto now with a gun pointed to my head. It's like, do it again, win the lotto. And it's impossible. And so this happens beyond our control. And so a lot of times, if you're technically sound, you can produce something similar. But I think the real thing is about having the sensitivity to say, okay, I'm tapping in. I'm just tapping in. And I think that what Beethoven was saying was, for somebody who doesn't have a strong relationship with God, and a lot of times strong is relative, but I mean strong in the sense that this is where we go with with everything we have. A lot of times artists are saying, this is God, because I know I'm not doing this. I know. I mean, I've listened to some of these symphonies and I'm like, you had this in your head? This is insane. And at a certain point, you realize this is deeper than the average human experience. And so you understand that this isn't necessarily me. And when that hits you, it can be devastating. And so some people realize this is divinity. This is beyond anything that I could ever fathom as a regular person. And then for some people, it's too much, and they're like, I can't deal with this. I don't know how to. You're asking me to do this regularly. I can't. I know this isn't me. And I think that essentially, if we all like really, really dig deep, we know that I don't know how to make my body work if. I don't know how to make my hair grow or my skin. So when I got into an accident, I was like, okay, it's not like I'm like, heal. You don't know how to do that. And so these things, when I go to sleep, I'm just trusting that, all right, I'm putting this on autopilot like it always is, and continue breathing, and you just don't know how it happens anyway. And I think that's a lot of what happens with artists who are tuned in and doing things that are seemingly masterful. They realize this is something that's beyond me, and I'm channeling something, or I'm being sensitive to something. I'm receiving something that's beyond what I know my free will is going to allow me to do on a daily basis. And so I think Beethoven was speaking in terms of this being a divine experience, and then uncovering that, because there's not that many. Our tradition, our philosophy has a lot of like little hidden coves and caves and pathways, and we're like, oh, look at this. And a lot of times people's approach to divinity is kind of straightforward, and it doesn't have these things. So I think that's where he was going with it. I know that's, for me, that's my interpretation.
Kaustubha, do you feel the same way? I mean, you're writing a book right now. Do you feel like there's times where the mind has to drop, the material mind has to drop, and something is also channeling? Because writings also have got that same thing. You hear about like these Tolstoys, these spiritual storytellers.
Interesting that you asked that, and I wanted to just take this out of the necessarily artistic realm too, and see how it plays out, because Arjuna was being asked to kind of be a warrior, but in a fugue state, right? You just be an instrument. He was asking him, and we see that Arjuna late in Bhagavatam, we see Arjuna his power was taken away. He had it one moment, and then you could put a gun to his head, he couldn't do it again, right? But that's an interesting question. I certainly don't claim to be. I'm not an experienced writer. I don't know if I can be a good writer. But it's a fact that I struggled to write anything for a long time, and then I wrote like 16 chapters in a month. And then I would go back and look at it later and say, oh, I kind of like this. So yeah, it does feel like it can either be given to you or it can be taken away at any time. You recommended a book to me recently. Was that Rick Rubin one? What is it called again?
Creative Act, A Way of Being.
Yeah, I'm reading it now, taking little notes, highlighting stuff, and
He's also into Bhakti and hardcore.
there you go. Yeah. And so he was, at least in some of those chapters, he was saying something that I was finding very interesting, which was like, for the artist, they can feel that there's a message that's meant to be broadcast. And somebody's going to do it. And if I'm aware of it, I can be the one that becomes the broadcaster of it. It's just, the time is right for something to come out, and I can be the one that can help make that come out. I thought that was a very interesting, and it's an approach that can very easily be applied to our devotional service.
Yeah, I think that he put it like that, and I think it was very interesting because our kirtan guru and our cooking guru Shrikanta would always say, if I'm not here to do my service, somebody else will. We're like, no, nobody can do what you do. And I think that a lot of times we try to explain that phenomenon, but language is often insufficient, or at least not accurate enough to understand that what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, or Krishna is saying to Arjuna, like, you could get on board, but everybody's going to die. And going through
whether you do or
whether you do it or not, this is I've already arranged it. And later on, I was reading and kind of putting things into context, and Krishna's promise to Bhumi, I'm going to get rid of all of this burden. And so all these kings who were basically taking the resources for the land and misusing things, that I'm taking care of all this. So Krishna's already arranging that everybody's going to go. Now, Arjuna, I'm using you as the instrument of what's going to happen, but I'm handling it. And so I think that's what's happening with us all the time. There are going to be certain things that are going to happen. It's going to happen whether you do it or not. And we'd like to think that we're special in that regard, but I think the special part of us is if we decide to go do it. Because when Shrikanta would say that, I was like, no, it's ridiculous. But one day he gives me a harmonium. He says, I'm going to India, you learn how to play harmonium. And I'm like, what are you? It's not a thing. And he left his body, and there's still kirtan, and there's still cooking, and there's still all the things that he did. And it may not be in the same way, but it happens in somebody else's unique offering. And so I think, I think the point of us doing it individually is that we're coloring it with our own experiences. And so this podcast, which I think is actually brilliant, because both of you are Brahmins, and you represent this very bipolar understanding of what Brahmana is. But somewhere, what's good about that is that you, at some point, you don't realize I could be a Brahmin like Raghunath. I can't be a Brahmin like Kaustubha, but it's possible. It's possible. And so, yes, these things are going to happen. And if I can do my little bit of seva, then it can help somebody else along the path. And I think, it's tough to think about, would Krishna consciousness have spread without Srila Prabhupada? Something to that magnitude. Maybe.
I guess it wouldn't have, but if Krishna wants it, then somehow it would have.
Yeah. And so those are one of those hypothetical questions. But it did. And Srila Prabhupada did take, and he when he says, I'm your humble servant, you go,
And of course, his coming to the West, what the moments before setting foot in the West, he made that prayer,
Yeah.
let me dance, let me dance. I'm a puppet for you. Interesting that it's almost like our greatest ambition is just to be a puppet, right? Because as you're saying, I can't lift my finger. I'm not the one that has the ability to do anything. So really what I have control of is just the will to serve with love. And if let me ask you this. And I want to ask you as well, Raghunath, because you've also led such an interesting life as someone who, from like 18 or 19 years old, you had influence. And maybe you felt like I've had it and then I've lost it, and then I've had it and then I've lost it. I don't know. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, and also to hear from both of you what's most essential to the formula if one wants to be. We could say it like this. It's kind of one of the most fundamental prayers, that a person could have is, I just want to be an instrument of God's presence. I want to be an instrument of God's love. I want to be an instrument of God's compassion. I want to be an instrument of God in some way. What qualities are there in God? To whatever extent he wants me to be it, I want to be it. I don't want to be anything else. What does it take to actually get there?
So funny, Raghunath was one of the first people we over the years, we've known each other, and then maybe had increasingly longer minutes of conversation over the years. And I remember one time I called him, I can't remember what it was for, but I was just like, I was expressing to him my appreciation. And he was like, dude, I'm not that. And I was like, what? And I was like, no. You're like, you want me? He's like, listen, I'm not all of that. Like, I'm just, seriously, I'm just, trust me, I'm the most regular guy. And it was really jarring at first. And then you realize, because I remember me saying that to people, and I was like, but no, like in my eyes, like this guy's like, if I were going to do yoga, that's the kind of yoga I need. I can't do this calm. And so I think that internally you come to this realization, like, I'm really not. And maybe it takes you going through these situations where you're like, life has to provide the yang to my yin. And a lot of times, if you don't have that balance, you forget and you think that I'm this complete circle, and you're just like, no, there's a dark side. And so for me, I realized that everything is in Gita. When Krishna says I'm the ability in people, not just men, you realize very quickly, okay, so I can't really do this on my own. But if you think more, if you twist your understanding of what Krishna is saying, just like recently Satyananda Maharaj was saying that Krishna is saying, I am time. We try to rush time. We try to do all these things that are, number one, impossible, but number two, against the natural order of things. If we understand Kaloshmik, I am time, then you're always with Krishna. He's always present. And so you can have an intimate relationship with time, and you can just be present and be here now and be okay. I'm not rushing to get over there but I have an intimate relationship. And so also, if you're saying, well, this is the ability is Krishna, it's not me, you're the ability in all of us, then you realize, like, I remember trying to make my kid do something, and he had his own idea. And I was like, you're holding his hand. He's like, just stop doing that. I'm trying to show. And he's like, and you're like, you just won't listen. And because I know better, because I'm a parent, you realize, like, oh, if I'm fighting you all the way, it's very difficult for me to get you to where you need to be. And so once you realize that, yeah, this is not really my ability, then you can work, you can kind of work consistently with the will that's beyond you. And a lot of times it takes a lot of humbling for it to be taken from you and given to you and taken from you. And yeah, I mean, you've been all over the place and had to, like, yeah. And at a certain point, you're out there and you realize, I have really no control over this situation. I'm doing what I can, but It's beyond me.
Thanks for your kind words, by the way. Appreciate that. Appreciate you. As far as like the formula, when you asked that question, I was thinking, I have an opportunity to either get possessed by any of the three gunas or a combination of them all. They're going to possess the body, like in the same way the drug addict thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to take drugs. No, you're not. You're being forced again and again against your better judgment. We have this phrase, a better judgment, like when you were completely sober or rational in your best state of being, you wouldn't make these choices. But now in this addictive downward spiral, you're making this choice. You're not making the choices. The gunas are making the choices for you. You're calling it free will. It's not free will at all. And so we're saying there's also one other state where actually the ego is completely moved out of the way, and now you're possessed by Krishna. And that I see as that flow state. And you don't have to be a member of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to get that. Great artists or people who are connected to their concept of perception of God, either they're taking in from this life or from previous lives, where they can, as the yogis say, or let the vrittis of the mind settle. I know when I would write a song, and I'm not Mozart, not by a long shot, but to write songs, I would actually feel like I'm not writing the song in the same way you expressed it. I've heard great masters like Leonardo da Vinci or say those same type of things, but it's almost like a puzzle is in the ether, and you have to put that puzzle together either lyrically or sonically. But I've also believe in like when I was doing martial arts seriously, I felt like the act of fighting. I'm sure even Mike Tyson would say something like this. They're just so into their art, whether you're like free climbing we spoke of yesterday, or ballet or gymnast. To be a gymnast, there's some type of the ego can get out of the way, that it's almost not you any longer. So I think when we can get possessed by Krishna, I know for myself, I used to go on long drives. I wrote in two ways. One is every day I will write for 3 hours a day. And in that 3 hours, nothing may come up, or something may come up, or tons of stuff may come up. But it doesn't matter. I have to check in for those 3 hours and just leave myself open for it. And I couldn't do it 6 hours a day because that window for creativity and stuff just wasn't there for 6 hours. Or I would just go, like one time I just couldn't finish a CD we had to do. And I just got in my car and I drove to Miami from New York, just kept on driving until I got to Miami. Because sometimes when I don't know if you notice, like when you drive for long distances, something happens in the mind. It's like a meditative state where the vrittis of the mind settle. That's when I wrote most of my songs, like in a car where you're not thinking about anything. It's almost like you're in meditation. And you're just like driving. You're not really even paying attention to the road.
No, you can't do anything else that you might want to do. You just
I can't get distracted, but at the same time, you don't have to really focus that much. And it's such a state. It's almost like maybe it's not Lord Vishnu. Maybe it's some Gandharva or some other being, higher being, or a demon. I don't know what it is, but something's talking to me, in those states. So that could have something to do with it. I'm not sure I have a grip on it, but it's something out of body.
Something on that I want to ask you one last question. Was there a response to that?
I was doing some research on that because it was very interesting. I'm like, when I'm driving, I'm like, and I actually heard Rick Rubin say something about this recently. But I can't remember if it's called like a theta state or something. It's when you're getting up, when you wake up, it's also there because you're in this place where you're not actively having to. So when you're in the shower, you can do a lot of great creative work because you're already doing something that's kind of automated, and your mind, it enters into another state. But driving is a really good one. The problem is when I'm drawing or something like that, if I'm driving, I'm like, how do I write this down? So yeah, I mean, I might have to go to Miami. I have to figure it out. But
Yeah, driving in New York is too much stop and start.
You can't drive in New York City. That won't help. But like bicycling, I find, running, I find, and walking alone, I find like the same thing.
Sitting in your sauna.
Sitting in the sauna, I'm chanting japa in the sauna. That's what I do.
We're running out of time. One last question. Not from the perspective of a kirtan leader, what is your advice to someone who's not the kirtan leader, but that's in the kirtan? What do you hope from them, and what can you share with them that will give them a deeper experience?
Not the kirtan leader, but in the kirtan.
Exactly.
It's funny, we were talking earlier about me. I was drumming first, and then I started leading kirtan, but it helped me be better at both, because I understood better what the kirtan leader wanted as a mridanga player, and it helped me understand as a kirtan leader what the mridanga player could do. So one thing I learned when I was playing mridanga was, if you're the best mridanga player in the room, then you got to kind of follow the lead of the worst mridanga player in the room, because now then everybody can be a part. And if you're the worst mridanga player in the room, then you should be really trying to focus on the best player in the room and trying to figure out what's the simplest version of that. How can I do that? And so when I'm in kirtan and I'm not leading kirtan, there's a lewd kind of like analogy that Dave Chappelle makes that I'll tell you later. But when I'm not in kirtan, what happens is I started to get into this space.
We'll have links to that in the description.
Oh, I hope not. But what helped me was trying to understand the different moods and meditations. Like, where's this kirtan leader trying to bring us? And then I realized that it's really about the name, and let me focus on the name. And one time I was actually in kirtan with Gora, and I was like, why do you keep singing these tunes? And he was like, you got a problem with the holy name? And I was like, no. Like, maybe I do, I don't know. But then I started to really focus on, this is the manifestation of the name. How do you get to a place where you're like, I'm choosy? You can have your favorite, but to be like, this deity is a little too weird for me. You know, his cheeks are too chubby, and his eyes are too lotus-like, he's too black, and his arms are too long. And so then you sit, and a lot of it is going to be about you. And so when you see critics of something, you realize that it's saying more about them than it's saying about the art sometimes. And so that's what I focused on. If I'm critical in the kirtan, I'm like, oh, what is this about me that I'm having a hard time connecting with the name? And that becomes my meditation. And it's just like, sometimes when you're having a cramp and you just breathe and think about that specific muscle, somehow your body's like, all right, we're going to get some oxygen to there and we'll relax. And I feel like that's what I've done in kirtans, where I'm just trying to focus, and I can focus on the name and focus on my relationship with the name. And it works itself out a lot of the times.
If we were all doing that, it would really work out, I suppose, huh? So just let go of your judgment of the kirtan, whatever may or may not appeal to your external ideas, and enter in.
Yeah, because ultimately we have our own preferences, and that's nice. But if you're there and you're having the association, you can look at it as, this is my personal time with, and so for some reason I'm here. And let me dig into that, rather than you're fighting it the whole time. Somehow, even subtly, if you're fighting it the whole time, you're going to find that you don't have a good experience.
Thank you very much. Do you want to wrap it up, Raghu?
That was great. It was a great conversation. Some running the board. This is the best podcast we had in a while. Thanks everybody for joining us. Mary, you got any takeaways for us, please? Did you take some takeaways?
We don't normally do takeaways on interview days, but this was so good that I did takeaways anyway. Kirtan is a facilitation between the community and the divine. Use your skills to serve God, not be God. All we really have is enthusiasm.
Or we don't have it.
Sincerity transcends external qualifications.
Like that.
Ultimately, we're all insufficient, but we can still inspire others.
Being insufficient is the qualification.
Color our offering with our own experience.
That's what Hanuman said about being friends with Ram yesterday. He didn't say it yes. He says it eternally, but yesterday
said it to me. I tell you all.
I-
No, he's not. He's a Vanara.
The ability is Krishna, not me. Yeah. That was deep.
We both lit up when he said that.
Focus on what's preventing you from connecting with the holy name. And Krishna is the supreme Beyonce.
What happened to Raghu and
Raghu and Kaustubha are the bipolar brahmanas.
which side of the spectrum am I on? That's the question. Thanks everybody for joining us on Zoom. Appreciate you following our crazy schedule. We're back on time tomorrow at 6 a.m. Eastern time, 12 noon for the Euros. And yeah, I'm traveling soon, but we're good for tomorrow. And I want to thank everybody for joining us live here. And especially want to thank Ananta Govinda from New York, who's hanging with us in the beautiful Alps. It's been a pleasure, Prabhu. Thank you so much for your kind words, for your inspirational talk. And if you haven't heard his kirtan, what's the best way they can hear a kirtan? SoundCloud? Ah, he's singing. You're part of this kirtan.
My praise in Dora and Chica.
Actually, we got to plug anything you want to plug.
Achuta's doing stuff.
How are they going to find that?
I don't even know. I'm gonna do some stuff too. I'll send them information.
We'll put it in the. Where's, oh, hey, there. You want Gopi Govinda girl. Govinda girl _. That's your goal. But you got stuff going on. No, you're not ready to.
Yeah, but it's so hard to find.
We're here to help them find it.
Is that your SoundCloud a concrete?
It is kind of our SoundCloud that we don't do anything on it now. I'll send you links.
Another artistic endeavor is what I'm trying to do.
AnantaCuffee.com is where we're going to be posting everything.
That's CUFEE.
FFEE.
CUFFEE. Check it out.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's a beautiful day. Let the magic continue to flow. Haribol.